Hi, I'm Paul.
And I'm Tiffany.
To some, we could be called career wizards.
And to others, sometimes we seem like therapists. However, we definitely are not.
But for you, we are the co-hosts of the Career Boosters podcast.
I think one that we as career professionals definitely need to be tackling head on. I think there are definitely types of jobs out there that we've conventionally thought of that are in jeopardy, frankly, due to AI. The world of work is changing. What I think is really important to take away from that, though, is that the jobs that are vulnerable are not the jobs where it is about the human quality. They're task specific. Anything that can be automated, frankly, will be. We've proven that time and time again. AI is just the most recent manifestation. The one area of skills that have always remained relevant and non-replaceable are those human skills.
Hello and welcome to the Career Boosters podcast, season 3, episode 11. Today we get to learn about and speak with someone that we have worked with for a very, very long time. Michelle Height is in charge of career education and communication skills for undergrad students at the Alberta School of Business. Also, Michelle is a graduate from our Executive MBA program. Michelle, myself, Tiffany, and Justin, the other career coach, are the ones responsible for putting together career programming, career education, and really helping the students with human skills and tactical skills around finding a job. We are a small but mighty team that comes with, I believe, combined like way over 80 years of experience between the group of us. And the thing that I appreciate about Michelle and the work that we all do is that we understand we're here for students to help them grow as people and future amazing business professionals. Michelle is one of the educators that works in the Biz series of classes, which has thousands and thousands and thousands of students each year. She talks on topics like resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn, narrative skills, narrative creation, communication skills. And previously to the Biz series of courses even existing, Michelle was in charge of a class that revolved all around communication skills. We don't need to hear me talk anymore. We get to head right into the conversation with Michelle. So Michelle, thanks for joining us. And if you can just start by answering the first question, which is how has your Executive MBA helped and impacted your career journey so far?
Excellent. Well, thank you, first of all, for inviting me. As you know, I have enormous respect and appreciation for what both of you do, and I've really enjoyed our collaboration over the years. So really grateful to be here and share my perspective, at least. In terms of my Executive MBA, for me, I think, I don't know if it's a unique path, but a little bit of a different path. For me, acquiring an MBA was frankly checking a box. I knew that in terms of my career progression, that there was a ceiling that I could not get past if I didn't have a master's level education in something. So I did go into it with very much of I need to do the thing, I will do the thing. What was really honestly transformative for me, both personally and for my career, was the impact of that Executive MBA. I truly did not appreciate how much that was going to change my personal career trajectory and my own growth. I think that challenged me to look at where my strengths truly lied, and really where I had the biggest area for growth as well. I think at that point I was a well-established professional. I'd been out of university for almost 20 years. And so I hadn't done a lot of reflection around that, to be perfectly honest. And so having to go into that space where you're asked to really think about who you are, where you want to be, and how the skills then translated into my daily life, like I said, I already said transformative, truly. And so very grateful that I decided to check that box because it did change my career. I literally would not be where I am in terms of my professional success and achievement, not because I have that MBA next to my name, but because of the skills I gained through the program. So it really has made a huge difference and taken me to a space I would never have arrived at otherwise.
And I appreciate the openness and candor of where it started, checking the box, because I think we don't necessarily hear that enough, because I don't think people surface it truly, but I truly think it's a reason that we have people in the MBA or the EMBA, Executive MBA, is because we think we have to do the thing, like you said. But it's up to each person to get something out of the thing. So while you went into it checking a box, you had to be open enough to the transformation. And so that I would like to offer kudos for and point out that that was a you thing, not a program thing. You didn't have to lean in, and so it's really cool that you were able to and get more out of it. But you help students check a box, but also hopefully transform. Tell us a little bit more. Paula gave us an overview of what you do, but what do you teach, and maybe what do you enjoy teaching the most out of all of the things that you do currently?
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I've been involved in career development for almost 30 years now at the School of Business, and I've worked exclusively within the business faculty that entire time. So one of the things that I love about what I do is that because I have that long-term perspective and I've worked within this field, I know that I'm giving students information that they couldn't just find with a good Google. I'm giving them information that's not about what is good in general, but what is good specific to this program of study and the employers that we deal with. And so what I love about that is that I know that when I have a good day, when I give my best and most, well-prepared information, I know that I'm giving them tools that change their career path. So for me, that impact is everything. In terms of what I teach, so it's everything, as Paul said, from cover letter and resume. I critique 500 to 600 cover letters and resumes a year, probably more, arguably. I do interview preparation, career exploration, even things like I don't know what to do with my major. I'm sort of confused about that. Covering things like transition to the workplace, negotiation skills, all of that. So those are part of my career development. And then within the Biz series, because I have that background in communication, I used to teach business communication, Business 301 for years. I have now brought that communication foundation into those Biz series. So really marrying the importance of business communication and professionalism with those core skills around how do I get the job in the first place. So I like to think that I offer that sort of bookend of how do I get the job, and then how do I actually make sure that I land as a professional in that space. And so my advising role lets me give them the tools to get in the door. And then I like to think that the content I deliver in the Biz series gives them the tools so that when they get there, they make the most of that opportunity and they don't very quickly go back out that door.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting that, when we think about the world of work, I think organizations just assume you have all of the skills necessary to write the proper email, to write with the same tone that everybody else in the organization does. And so I just think of how critical and crucial your role is to just being job ready at the time of them kind of stepping into the world, because I don't think that their strategic thinking class or any of those other classes are really looking at those aspects of it. Now, to do their job, they're probably very well equipped from a theory perspective, but maybe from the other side of things, right? Those human skills, that's definitely what you're helping with, which is so amazing and so cool to hear. You said almost 30 years in career development and career management here at the School of Business. Tell us what you've seen in regards to changes when it comes to resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn, for heaven's sakes. I remember, I think it was 2006 or 2007 when I started, did you get the 6-7 joke there? Just not, never mind. That these things have changed, right? And LinkedIn came out in, I think, 2006 or 7 or 8 or 9 or something like that. Things have changed. What have you noticed, the biggest changes?
Well, I mean, as you said, a lot has changed. When I first started working in career development as a recruitment assistant, the jobs were on paper in binders that the students had to come and flip through. People submitted their resumes, printed out, signed in ink, and submitted through envelopes in drop-off boxes. And so the accessibility for this information was just so very foreign to what we're used to now. And one of the things I'd actually been hired for at that point was to digitize content. There were things that we had used that somebody had typed on a typewriter at some point. And so I was actually hired because I had strong office skills, but also technical skills. I knew HTML, which was just a random interest on my part. And I was part of the team that actually moved us to being online and to have content available. So I've seen that alone was a huge change from what people, who graduated, back in the 80s and 70s, from what their experience is. The biggest change that I've seen in the past, I would say 5-6 years, is how much the recruitment is now virtual, because we used to have employers on campus doing interviews and holding information sessions, and they're still present, but in very different ways. And the majority of what students are engaging with is websites and LinkedIn and using all these different online tools. So in some ways, it makes the job search more accessible, right? I could not have done my job search at 3 o'clock in the morning when I happened to have the time when I was a student, because everything was in person. But it also means that there's an expectation that they're more connected. And so in some ways, I think that because that is possible to be that connected, the expectation on the part of the employer is that that you're doing that research, you're doing all that additional prep, you're present on LinkedIn, you're using all of the technology tools. And so I think the impact of technology has changed it in such a fundamental way. And I think in some ways the expectation is much higher for how students show up in those spaces. And I think that makes the work they have to do to be prepared harder. And so I think that's a big challenge. And then if you factor in the role of AI, that becomes another whole other complex thing. And students will I think they see AI as like that tool that helps them write the cover letter and resume. So they go, well, what harm could there be? Obviously, you and I, we all have opinions about how negative that actually is, how it depersonalizes your materials. So for those listening at home, right, when you watch this, AI, it can be a good starting point. It's not the finishing point. So just my little plug there. But also, I think what it does is, that idea of what can AI do in terms of what the employers are doing. So how are employers using AI? How does that in many ways make it harder to get seen? So many employers use screening tools, ATSs, and the things they necessarily pick up on are not necessarily the things that we would conventionally expect. And so sometimes students are being excellent candidates being not seen, not selected for things that have got more to do with the mode of application than necessarily the qualifications. And that adds a whole other layer of difficulty, I think, around being successful in the job search. And arguably at a time when the market is one of the hardest, not the hardest, that I've seen, but certainly it's one of the more challenging we've seen in a while.
Hands in the air for everybody who has submitted a paper resume to a job. And then, yeah, I knew that was all of us. And how interesting now that we have flipped to the digital side. So you talked about ATSs. I mean, AI is now part of the screening interview. And so we are now moving to AI and AI agents being I was going to say person, but thing that does the screening interview, and how far we flipped the other way. So let's talk a little bit more about these digital tools that you are now supporting students with. What's out there? What are we using right now? How are you supporting students in this fully digitized world of recruitment management?
So the wonderful thing is that the School of Business is willing to invest in tools to support student success in that area. Not all students have access to those. I've been advocating for, and I know all of us have been advocating that the students are provided these resources, because the free version or the cost to them is not it's not inconsequential. And so, a couple of the tools that the School of Business uses, we use JobScan, the premium version, which gives students support in terms of resume, starting point on cover letter, LinkedIn. Those are all great ways to get to that point where you're getting in front of the employer. And that particular tool is wonderful because it does run it through the lens of what we'll get through the ATS based on your job. That's a level of applicability and actually testing the resume to the specific job and the specific processes that we've never had before. And I think that mirrors the student's experience. We also have tools like, for example, interview prep, which allows them to prepare a video interview and get that practice of being interviewed by no one, because a lot of companies are using that initial prepared video where you're answering questions to no one. And that, we often used to say, pay attention to how your interviewer is responding, what kind of nonverbal communication are you getting from them, and use that to help direct your interview. You don't have that in those spaces. And not all employers are using it, but it certainly is very common, increasingly common. So having interview prep as a tool for students to practice not just their interview skills, but that pre-recorded non-feedback space around interviews, I think is a huge step forward as well. we have a number of those tools. We even have things like Going Global, where it has an AI culture wizard that's designed to help students gauge how well they understand the business space they're working in, really relevant for international students going to another country, but also very valuable for students who maybe are not as familiar with Canadian business practices, and how do they actually understand it. So the fact that these tools exist to help them assess their skills and prepare for the reality of the job market, to me, I think is really exciting. And I love that I work within a discipline within the School of Business where they actually invest in students in this, that they pay for this support so the students are not bearing the brunt of it. There are countless other tools out there that do these jobs that may do them even better. But these are ones that for us, they meet the need and they're supportable, and we take some of that cost off the student. Because one of the things that I think we've always wanted to aim for is make sure that all students get the same level of quality service, and that there should not be a financial barrier to success at this end at least. There's only so many variables we can correct for rather, but this ensures that at least this isn't one of them. And so I think, when we're looking at those tools, those are a couple of the tools that we're using to facilitate that.
Nice. Michelle, you get a chance to work in these biz series of classes. We talked a little bit about this very impactful thing that the School of Business has started to roll out. You help them work on their elevator pitches. You help them work on these narratives. So my first question is, just tell us a little bit, very briefly, just about the biz series of classes, and then what is the process like trying to help these students build their brands?
Okay, great question. So the Biz Series, for those that aren't aware, is a series of 4 courses that now, as of this year, all business students will be required to take, Biz 101, 222, 303, and 404. And they're designed to be this continuity of core skills that all business students should have. So things around, clear understanding of, obviously there are academic options, but also analytical skills, communication skills, those larger professionalism skills. We talk a lot about just what it means to show up as a professional. We talk about things like branding, as you've mentioned. But the courses are designed to provide this business foundation. So the first course is more about understanding what business is, so 101. 222 is more around the individual and the professionalism. How do you show up as a professional in these spaces, and giving them core skills for that. 303 is more about the larger impact. So business and globalization and your impact, and how does your role as a business person, as a leader, how does that impact the communities and the larger business world. And so we talk about that, and that one's interesting because we talk about systems thinking, which is a really interesting way of problem solving, looking at not just the problem, but how does that problem connect with other problems and other systems, and how sometimes we make a change that sounds on the surface like it's a good change that actually just creates different problems. And so that one's really interesting. And then the 404 is sort of a culmination of all of that brings it together in a capstone that's directed by the students in terms of their interest and career objectives. So, really designed to give our undergrad students a really solid business foundation. But as you alluded to, it's also a giant class. I'm usually lecturing to a class of, in 101, it's 700-800 students, I think. And that's both hybrid, virtual, and in person. And then the other sections are, 500 students or so, and they're offered throughout the year. So I will say that lecturing at that scale is very different. In 301, and when I used to lecture in the leadership certificate program, both of those were much smaller scale. 301 was 40, 50 students. The leadership certificate was 12. And the kind of dialogue and narrative, which I know both of you can relate to, the kind of dialogue and narrative and the kind of individual discussions you can have is very different. I don't get to really interact with my students in the classroom so much as I try to have impact. I think I said to you, Paul, after one of the first times I taught at that scale, you said, what was it like? I said, in many ways, it's like being a performer. I'm making sure that my performance is memorable. And hopefully then, if I'm memorable, you took away that was a bit of knowledge. I like to think, especially in the 101 class, that I'm less teaching and more planting seeds. And it might not necessarily be immediately relevant in the moment, but it will become evident the next time you go to do something and that skill's applicable. And I feel a lot of times students will say, oh, this is obvious. And then it's not. And I have had students come back and say, I didn't necessarily understand the applicability of why you taught us, for example, proposals and reports in 222. And then I got hired on an internship, and the very first week I was asked to draft a proposal. And you're like, oh, this is in fact a practical skill. And so I think one of the things that I really enjoy about this content is the imminent practicality of it. All the other things, like you said, that they learn in the program, but they're skills that they will apply. But the course content is really about that practical professional development. And I think that's really important.
And I have really enjoyed that Paul and I get to have a small little flavor of what you do, because you and the team that you work with have brought us in to specifically talk about a topic that we could talk about ad nauseum, but strengths. And it's a topic that you have absolutely leaned in with us, both in our team, but certainly bringing us into the Biz series and in just conversation. I know you to be someone who also really enjoys talking about strengths. So I wanted to weave that in a bit about how are we doing that in the Biz series, but also what are your top strengths, and why is it that you like to talk about strengths just like we do?
Awesome. Well, I think when Paul mentioned this, and I didn't quite get to it, that impact of teaching brand, part of what we're doing is really creating brand. And I just sometimes people don't love that word. They think of like a product, but really what it is, and I think Paul has come to this before, that idea of what are people saying about you when you're not there. And so I think that's a big part of what we're teaching them, is understanding that ability to manage that. And so in terms of strengths, I think when you understand your strengths, you have the ability to then be really, I think, aware of what people are likely to talk about when you're not there, but also lean into how you apply those strengths. And then to me, where does that also identify your areas for growth? What I found really fascinating when I did the strengths is none of it was a surprise, but yet it landed differently than any of the other sort of personality testing I've done. And for me, looking at those strengths really helped me understand, I think, where I do what I do best. So, and I don't have my list of my strengths in front of me, but a couple of my key ones are context, which is that sort of background and history. What have we done before we move forward? Obviously, I'm a big believer in that. Input, which is gathering that good content. Communication, that's kind of obvious. Positivity, I think one of the things that I hopefully am known for is that I'm a fairly warm and inviting person. I always say I have resting ask me a question face. And so, I try to bring that into everything I do. I think it sometimes can be easy to become a bit cynical sometimes. Yeah. And for me, I always try to look at each interaction with someone as a new opportunity to learn. And then, and I think I remembered all of them. My last one is woo, which is that energy. And I think anybody who's met me is like that. I'm a big personality, and so I do bring a lot of woo and a lot of cheerleading into things I do. And so, to me, looking at all of those, it just made it more tangible somehow of where my strengths lie, and I think made it easier for me to label and identify where I could apply them better, if that makes sense.
That's cool. Michelle, I think that we could have you on for like a Joe Rogan style 3-hour podcast, because we literally have, we all do the same work. The scale that you do your work at is just not even, I can't even fathom that kind of scale. But I'm going to ask you one question, and then Tiffany will head into the lightning round. And so I see second guest appearance opportunities for Michelle here. With the integration of AI into our classrooms, though, and I guess the world as a whole, how do you think that's going to impact the world of career education moving forward?
That's a great question, and I think one that we as career professionals definitely need to be tackling head on. I think there are definitely types of jobs out there that we've conventionally thought of that are in jeopardy, frankly, due to AI. The world of work is changing. What I think is really important to take away from that, though, is that the jobs that are vulnerable are not the jobs where it is about the human quality. They're task specific. Anything that can be automated, frankly, will be. We've proven that time and time again. AI is just the most recent manifestation. The one area of skills that have always remained relevant and non-replaceable are those human skills, right? Our communication skills, our interpersonal connection, our leadership, our teamwork, the ways in which we work with others, and the way that we're thoughtful, our analytical skills, all of those sort of things. Those are not replaceable by a AI tool. And those are, honestly, the most successful business professionals are not people who are good at the task. They're good at building community. They're good at building connections. They're good at building relationships. relationships with customers, with coworkers, with employees. And so I think that is a skill area that is never losing its currency. And so when we talk about insulating yourself to be recession proof, to be change, fluid, to be nimble, I think if students look at the way that they can lean into arguably their strengths, look at the way the strengths connect, and look at the way that connects with our human skills, that is a skill area and focus that is not vulnerable to AI. But the reality is, yes, the work world is changing and some jobs simply won't exist. I also believe firmly that there are jobs that have never been necessary before that are going to be important now. And so I think world of work is changing, but are we losing jobs? No, I think we're just going to have different jobs. And in some ways, we're automating jobs that are frankly a bit tedious. I don't think that's necessarily, now I'm not saying I love everything about AI. Please don't everybody come at me about that. but I do think that there are some potential benefits. We are removing some of the tedious jobs and using the parts of us that make us best. We're at our best as humans when we human.
Agreed. I'll offer one that's been rumbling around in my brain and that I've been seeing a lot of articles on, especially from an HR perspective, that because we are losing some and gaining some, but we're losing entry jobs. We are losing that first rung on the ladder, or that's what's changing the most, or it's going first. And if we think about the students that you certainly are prepping to get into the work world, they are students that are heading for that first rung in the ladder. And so we all, the three of us and four of us with Justin, and anybody else in career profession, is having to figure out how do we prep people where the entry part of the ladder looks different, which is just kind of rolling around in my head. All right, Paul's right. We could keep going, but we can't. So, lightning round, are you ready? 3 quick questions, 3 gut answers. Ready?
I'm ready.
You're in like a cat-like state of readiness, like I call
Yes.
it. All right, first question. What part of your career story has given you the biggest boost?
My connection with people, my ability to connect.
What do you wish you'd learned sooner?
That really thoughtful self-reflection. I've always been good at leaning into my strengths, recognizing where my areas for growth were. That was an important part that actually came from my master's.
And service is so important to Paul and I know it's important to you too. So super curious to hear how service is going to show up for you in the coming week.
Then the next week or so is wrapping up the term, and I know students are in a time of high stress. So for me, it's going to be making sure that I'm responsive to student needs. It's always a high priority for me. I always say students are the reason that they're the only reason I have a job, and so being really responsive to that is important. So.
Sounds good. And I'm chuckling because I would bet people can't see it because it'll be off camera, but Paul has gotten very blurry all of a sudden, and I don't think it's my eyeballs that have changed. Paul, do you want me to ask you a random question, or are you going to do it from a blur? Oh, and he's also on mute. He's really ending this real well.
The blur is going to ask Michelle a question, and maybe I have a new superhero name or something like that. I am very tall and I don't run very fast, so I don't know how I would be called the blur, but a camera is blurry. So here we go. Michelle, you have been here for 30 years almost. That means you get 51 weeks of vacation a year. And so I would love to hear, Michelle, where is the next place Michelle is? I'm just joking. She does not get 51 weeks of vacation. She gets a lot of vacation time, though. And where is Michelle headed next is my question.
Actual, like, holiday-wise?
Oh, yeah.
I actually leave Saturday for one of my epic holidays. I don't get 51 days, though, or 51 weeks. We don't get that much, but I have been here long enough that I get lots of holidays. I'm actually leaving Saturday for Mexico to get some much needed relaxation and to soak in the water and relax in the waves. So that's I have 2 types of holidays: the relaxing holiday and the adventure holiday. This one's a relaxing holiday, and my next adventure holiday is hopefully going to be Japan.
Wow. And yes, any employees or team members listening to this, or suddenly Leona is going to get a bunch of emails from HR. Why does Michelle get more vacation than me? Way to go, Paul. So kidding. But that sounds like a lot of fun, and we will be very jealous, especially when you come back. A slightly darker shade of, and I say this as another very pale person, pale, slightly less pale.
I'll be more putty colored.
Yeah, excellent. I do the same. Oh, Michelle, it is a joy always when we all get together. We can just talk and talk and talk. And so, what I appreciated is that we focused this talk around a really important subject to all of us, which is just supporting students in the area of business and career. And you've done it for a long time with a lot of mastery. You talked about being nimble and adaptable. Look at how much you've adapted over the last 30 years on how to support students and continue to with the world of work that keeps changing. So, thank you so much for bringing that expertise, for bringing your just big energy. It is, but it's an energy that we love and we adore, and we know the students do as well. So thank you, and yes, we will have to have you on again just so that we can continue chatting, but appreciate you.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you both very much, and I would come back anytime. I'm never shy about talking in general, but this is absolutely an area that I could go on for hours because after 30 years, I have at very least a lot of perspective and opinions, but also I think a lot of evidence to show that the what we teach and what we're focusing on really matters. So thank you for giving me another space to share that impact. I value that greatly.
You're welcome. Key takeaways for such an area of rich conversation. For me, it was early in the conversation when she talked about she helps students both get in the door and stay and not, be asked to leave out the door real quick. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions around what she does, what we do, what career kind of support does. And I think one of the misconceptions is often that we just help people get in the door. That's the biggest area of focus, and the reality is that getting in the door is such a small part of what we do, that it is about being a good human, which I know you're going to talk about, and what skills can we also help you develop so that when you get in the door, A, it's the right door, you're going for the right door, and B, it's a door that then you can thrive inside. And so myth busting that we are just getting people indoors. We do a lot more than that, and she does a lot more than that, which is pretty cool.
When I think about what career management or career education means to people, a lot of people just think resumes and cover letters and these things, and I can't agree more that. And I will just later on, she talked about what AI is not going to replace anytime soon, and it is literally the people skills that you and I get to and have the privilege to educate people around on a daily, weekly, monthly, annually basis, which is so cool. And I think human skills. We have now maneuvered away from these words soft skills. It is our human and people skills that mean so much. And these are the golden ticket to professional success, I think is the way that I would like to put it. So.
Awesome. So many more key takeaways, but I like those two standouts. And next week, we don't know. We don't always know what we are doing the coming week, and this would be one of those times. So there will be an episode. We will surprise you, but we will see you next week. Thanks for tuning in to the Career Boosters podcast. We hope you had a blast. Yeah, we know that's corny. Catch you next time, and remember to subscribe wherever you enjoy podcasts.